Hello, life groups. We're here talking about prayer altars. In the next few weeks, we're going to be looking at what is a prayer altar, why is it important, how do you build a prayer altar, and what are some of the practical steps we can take. So we really want to go a deeper look into this and begin to really help us have the presence of God moving in our hearts, our families, our church, and our community. Now, I want to give you a little history of where did the concept of prayer altars come from and how was it really experienced and developed. Now, it's in the Bible. It's all over the Bible. You see every character in the Bible building an altar to the Lord and God's presence coming down. And I'll get into that in a minute. So it is biblical and it's been throughout history. But the place that I first experienced it was in the nation in East Africa called Uganda. And it was a strategy that God gave them to help change the course of their nation. Now, Uganda, ever since it was colonized and then released from the 60s on, was just in constant turmoil. They had dictators, they had civil war, they had disease. The whole structure of their society was falling apart. The family was falling apart for lots of reasons because of all the war and the destabilization. They had bad economy. They had bad leadership, all these kinds of things going on. And in fact, it was so bad that Ugandans didn't even want to tell other people they were from Uganda. They were embarrassed of their nation. I mean, it was known that Idi Amin was a terrible dictator. And so any way that Uganda was known was for bad, not for good. And so the church was crying out and saying, God, how can we see a change in our nation? I mean, it was the nation worst hit by AIDS in the whole world. I mean, 36% of people that would engage in sexual relations were getting AIDS. I mean, it was terrible. In fact, the World Health Organization was saying that within 10 years, it was going to be a failed state because people would either be dead or sick that were of working age. So they saw all of this devastation and they were crying out to God, what do we do? And God began to give them this strategy that we call prayer altars and told them, begin to go and build prayer across your nation and I will pull your nation out of troubled waters. In fact, I will turn this nation around. Instead of being known for AIDS and dictators and war, it'll be known for revival and for healing and for God's presence and for the kingdom. And so they went around with this really the concept was that every heart is an altar to God. Every home needs a family altar. Every workplace needs an altar that draws God's presence. And the church needs to be a lighthouse in the community that's drawing the presence of God. So they went around building altars of prayer all around, and they would go into communities in the east, the west, the north, and the south, and they just really began to build prayer in these people's lives. And the people began to seek after God. They began to saturate in the Word, and they began to worship and minister to the Lord and draw God's presence into their communities. And God was teaching them, as my presence comes, the darkness begins to flee. And so they began to say, as my presence comes in your home, your neighbors will be won to Christ. Family members will be brought to Christ. The darkness in your home will begin to be cast out. As your presence begins to come in, homes all around an area, the darkness, whether it's the clubs where bad things are going on or this gang that is there terrorized, that you'll begin to see God beginning to push this darkness away as his presence would begin to come. So these people began to build altars all across this nation, and they're praying, and the families are experiencing revival. Children, in fact, God was even telling them, you won't even have to discipline your children as much, because as my presence come, I will begin to deal with them. And they just saw miraculous things taking place in families, in workplaces, in the church, in communities. I mean, testimonies were by the thousands. And it began to spread so much that then they began to hold large gatherings where they were seeing their society being healed, being transformed, people that do documentaries were coming from Europe and America to record this because it was so astonishing and so much like the God of the Bible that they wanted to record it. But at the heart of it was that people began to build prayer altars and God's presence began to come and change things in the land. And it really struck me because I've been to Uganda maybe 20 times. I saw the way you'd even begin to experience their family altars. And you realize these people are genuinely seeking God. This isn't a ritual. This isn't a routine. These are people that are realizing without the presence of God, darkness will take over our lives, our families, our society. And they begin to become hungry and humble for God's presence. That was the key. It wasn't just saying prayers. It was hungry and humble for the presence of God. As they begin to do that, the young people begin to be drawn to the Lord. They begin to give themselves to the Lord. Churches grew. Society changed. I mean, it was dramatic. And this is not just something that happened in Uganda and then Uganda started taking to other parts of the world. This is something that is biblical. You see, everybody in the Bible that was really used of God, God directed them to build prayer altars. I mean, one of the first ones we see is Abraham. When God sent him in to take possession of the promised land, it was go build altars of prayer all throughout the land. Draw my presence. I mean, this land was filled with idol worshipers and immoral people and wickedness and violence. And God is saying, if this is going to be a land dedicated to a people that are mine, we have to draw my presence for this land to really be given unto me. And so that was God's strategy to take the promised land. And God saw, you saw Moses, Gideon, David, the whole tabernacle, all of it was about drawing God's presence into the land. And even when you go back into history and you see the times of revival, the times when God was moving in nations, it was always people that were beginning to be hungry for God's presence. They're being in the Word of God as the centerpiece of their life again. They're really beginning to worship God and minister to God, pray as families, pray as congregations. God would come and move, and He would begin to transform society, and it would begin to light a fire of revival that would spread throughout the land and go all over the world. The first church was that way. They said they devoted themselves to the disciples' teaching, to the Word, and to prayer, and to coming together and seeking God. And God was shaking buildings and moving in society. You know, one of the things that I love is in the founding of our country, prayer, that really the prayer altar was active. In fact, when you read documents, you realize in the founding of our country, the families in our country had a family altar at the beginning of the day and the end of the day. And God was moving in those people. They were giving them the vision, the dream to start this country the way they did and wanting it to be a country that would impact the other nations of the world. So I say all of that to say this is something that has literally changed thousands, tens of thousands of families all over the world. I've seen it in the Far East. I've seen it in Europe. I've seen it in Africa. That as people are seeking to draw God's presence as individuals, to keep the fire of God's, that love, that hunger for God burning in their heart, and as they do it as families and as they do it as congregations, that God finds that's, you're drawing my presence. Now I can begin to move and begin to change and bring dramatic things. You know, when the Ugandans shared these stories with us, I realized how unprotected we left our families because we weren't drawing His presence. So darkness was coming in through the media, through the peers and schools, through the internet, through all this, and we weren't doing anything to stop it. And so the darkness was winning. It was stealing our children. It was stealing things out of our homes. So why we do prayer altars is because it's the way to begin to push through the darkness and see the presence of God come in and bring the blessings, the abundance, the life that He promised to give. But it is also something that we realize it's the only way we can live the victory that He promised, is through, you know, His presence coming and intermingling with us, touching our lives. One of the things that is my dream, because I've seen this in other parts of the world, is that Focal Point Church will be a place where every heart that is given over to Jesus Christ is on fire because the altar is active in their life. Their own walk with God, they're learning how to build their heart as an altar to God, and that their home is a place that they come together as a family and they're seeing God's presence come in their families, and He's transforming their lives and their families, protecting them. And then we're then coming together as a people to Focal Point in the various gatherings that we do, and the presence of God is so tangible that as people come to be a part of this, that we're seeing God actively transform lives all around this community. I believe, my heart, my vision is that we are supposed to be a testimony of how real God can be because we're drawing the altar. So I hope as you think about this, why do we need a prayer altar? Is the only way we can walk in the tangible presence of God. God doesn't just come because there's things we do to draw his presence. And if we do those, God will move in greater ways than we've ever imagined. So as we go through this study, let's really keep that vision about how much we need the presence of God to move in our own hearts, in our lives, our families, even in our congregation. Amen.